na nga, tapos hindi mo kinuha yung BR Form 2307, now as you file your income tax return, or most especially right now, we are about to file our income tax return for 2021. Kung hindi mo na-attach yung BR Form 2307 worth 200, then you have to get another 200 from your pocket. Kasi hanapan ni BIR, wala kang certificate, magbayad ka ng 200 unless you can submit that BR Form 2307. Alright? But on the part of the buyer, definitely, this is one obligation, okay, being a withholding tax agent. Always remember there are two personalities or roles of a business owner. One is to pay the corresponding income tax and value-added tax on the transaction, but the other role is for you to be the withholding tax agent of the government. Okay, and in case you would comply with the withholding tax role or obligation, you have to present to the BIR, ito na deduct ko at na-remit ko. At ang form na gagamitin ko would be the 1601 EQ for the quarterly withholding tax return. But you also have the monthly withholding tax return using 061. Okay? E or F, no? So here, we have to classify also what kind of tax no yung wini-withhold natin. One is creditable. So creditable is taxes withheld on certain income payments, and this one, it's intended to equal or at least approximate the tax due of the payee. Bakit tong creditable? It's most of the time approximate tax due of the payee. Kasi by the end of the quarter, the income recipient or yung seller has to declare, no? Has to file his corresponding return. And then, yung pagpa-file niyang tax return na yan, he will be allowed to claim deductions. Kasi pag sinabi natin creditable withholding tax for income tax purposes, the tax is computed based on the net income. When you say net income, sales less the cost of sales and expenses, you arrive at your net income. Doon magbabase si BIR pagdating sa income tax liability mo. Okay? So, as you compute, by the way, right now, individuals are subject to the graduated income tax rates under the TRAIN law, all right? But for corporations, we have now the CREATE Act, wherein corporations may be subject to 20% or 25%, all right? So here, once you, let's say, subject that transaction to withholding tax, yung income recipient may be allowed to claim expenses. Kaya yung withhold mong tax is just an approximate na gagamitin ng income recipient. Pwede kasing kulang pa yung babayaran, kulang pa yung tax na nabayaran ng income recipient by the end of the year after deducting the creditable, or it could be more than the income tax due kasi pwedeng net loss yung company. All right, but the income this is what I mentioned. The income recipient is still required to file an income tax return. Okay, to report the income and pay the difference between the tax withheld and the tax due on the income. If it's a creditable withholding tax, it only means by the end of the period or year, the income recipient or the seller has to still declare and file his income tax return and use the creditable withholding tax as tax credit. All right, but for a good example of creditable withholding tax would be creditable withholding tax on compensation. For example, on the part of the clients of Salamea, no, definitely when we talk about yung services ni Salamea, it's more of providing actuarial services, retirement, even payroll, no. So yung mga salaries ng mga empleyado, masasubject yan sa withholding tax. And at the end of the year, the employee actually, if they are qualified to substituted filing, it is the employer na ang magwi-withhold ng correct amount of tax on compensation. So by the end of the year, dapat wala nang babayaran additional tax si employee kung na-withhold ng tamang employer. But if kulang, no, kung kulang, then if the employee is not qualified under substituted filing, kailangan niya mag-file ng income tax return and i-claim yung mga tax withheld ng mga employers, and the balance should be paid by the employee. Okay? Kasi siya yung direct income recipient eh. Pero what we have to remember is that in terms of the creditable withholding tax on compensation, there must be employer-employee relationship. Because if there's no employer-employee relationship, then the relationship may be a different relationship, pwedeng contractual, professional relationship, no? So, the treatment would be different pagdating sa mga tax rates. Kasi later on, I'll show you yung mga rates for compensation and what are the rates for expanded or for professional or contractual rates. Pero the other withholding tax, no, ito yung sinasabi natin expanded. This is for the professional, contractual, rental. It's creditable against the income tax due of the payee for the taxable quarter or year. So if we are talking about the income recipient here, if they are employees, they are subject to withholding tax on compensation using the withholding tax withholding tax table on compensation. Pero kung it would be a different transaction, let's say mga professionals, rentals, even actually janitorial services, they are considered as transactions subject to expanded withholding tax, right? But there's another withholding tax which is final withholding tax, and this one it's more of a final settlement of the tax liability. Okay, and it's a kind of withholding tax which is prescribed on certain income, and it's not creditable against the income tax due of the pay on other income subject to regular rates of tax. Kasi itong final withholding tax, it's very specific for a particular transaction. Na if it's already subjected to withholding tax, yung income recipient will no longer be required to file his corresponding tax return. Okay? So yun yung tatandaan natin. That pag final withholding tax, what's a good example of final withholding tax? Well, actually, final withholding tax on interest income from bank deposits. We all know if the interest generates, or let's say earned, let's say if the bank deposit earned interest, no, that's automatically subject to final withholding tax of 20% generally, unless it's foreign currency, that's 15%. So on the part of the depositor, hindi niya na kailangan mag-file ng income tax return niya. Unlike pag doon sa, let's say, sa lessor, sa mga professionals, they have to file pa rin yung returns to declare their corresponding income, okay, and subject that to income tax. Pero actually dun sa income tax kasi, it may be from different sources yung revenues. A taxpayer or business entity may be engaged in sale of goods, sale of services. So i-reflect niya yan sa income tax return niya, no? And then whatever the balance or the net income will be subject to income tax, and any tax credit may be claimed. Unlike yung final withholding tax, it's very specific. If it's for interest income on bank deposits, yung 20%, dun niya lang dapat i-applyan. And that one constitutes full and final settlement of the income tax due for that particular transaction. All right? So we have to differentiate kung ano yung creditable and kung ano yung final. But there are certain matters or items that we have to remember that income subject to income tax. So it's already let's say subject to personal or corporate income tax, may be subject to withholding tax. So the word here is may be subject to withholding tax. Bakit may be? Because the withholding tax on certain transactions, or not all transactions are subject to withholding tax, no? Pero pwede pa rin silang masubject sa income tax. Okay? What could be a good example of this? May be subject to withholding tax lang. I mentioned earlier that there might be top withholding agents, no, na kailangan mag-withhold ng 1% or 2% on the regular supplier of goods and services, aside from the regular withholding tax rates. Pero kung halimbawa yung transaction, no, would not qualify as top supplier or top regular supplier of goods or services, then that transaction will not be subject to withholding tax, but you still have to declare and pay the corresponding income tax for such transaction, no? For example, you're a seller of, let's say, seller of laptop to you, and then you have a client na top withholding agent. Pero yung laptop, it's just, for example lang, it's just worth 10,000. Hindi siya pumasok doon sa, not 10,000, let's say 5,000, no? Very, very cheap yung laptop, for example. Hindi siya nag-qualify sa top withholding agent. So, hindi siya nag-qualify as regular supplier, si top withholding agent does not need to withhold 1% on the transaction. Pero si seller has to declare the income and pay the corresponding tax. Okay? So the word there is maybe kasi hindi absolute yung lahat ng transactions subject to withholding tax. Pero remember also, income exempt from income tax is consequently exempt from withholding tax. So this one naman is we have to know the personality of the income recipient. If he is or it is exempt from income tax, no, because the taxpayer is enjoying income tax holiday, for example, then the buyer or the withholding tax agent should not withhold tax kasi hindi naman magbabayad ng income tax tong seller eh. So why should I withhold? Hindi na rin niya magagamit yon kasi nga yung transaction is exempt from income tax. So that excuses the withholding tax agent to withhold tax. But the other one is income not subject to withholding tax, okay, does not necessarily mean that it is not subject to income tax. So here naman, on the part of the seller, sabihin niya, oh, hindi siya na subject sa withholding tax, no? Automatic ba? Exempt na yan? Hindi, no? It may be subject also to income tax. Hindi lang talaga pumasok sa withholding tax rate. All right. So those are the general guidelines. But some of you will ask, attorney, you're always discussing withholding tax. Ano bang impact ng withholding tax sa amin? Well, actually, this is a question posed, no? Laging tinatanong, what are the effects of non-withholding of tax? Well, we have to remember, according to Revenue Regulation 6-2018, a taxpayer may be allowed to claim expenses as long as you subject that to withholding tax and you have proven to the BIR that you have already remitted it to the BIR. Pero what would be the effect? No. So let's have an illustration. I believe most of our participants are engaged in business, no? And if, for example, okay, you are a seller of goods, or let's say you are providing services to clients, pero definitely you will have to present to the local government, to the BIR, that you have an official business address. Okay? So pwedeng actually mangyari dyan is you are renting or you may have your own building, no? Pero let us assume you are renting and then you claim that rental expense, okay, as deductible expense. Kasi syempre, ngayon, as you prepare your income tax return, you will have to look into all expenses na pwede mong i-claim, no? Pwede mong i-claim para mapababa yung income tax liability mo. So in this particular case, what you have to do is to claim the corresponding rental expense, but in case the BIR, kasi before when I was an examiner, I usually also audit mga expenses. Was it subjected to withholding tax? If it was not subjected to withholding tax, then there are several consequences in case of non-withholding. So here, kung halimbawa, kinlaim mo siya as income deductible expense for income tax purposes, but you fail to withhold, what will happen is, on the part of the BIR, it will disallow yung rental kasi hindi nga nag-comply sa withholding tax requirement. So if you are a corporation, definitely, yan, corporate income tax impact niyan is 25% kung halimbawa nag-qualify ka. By the way, I have lecture also about income tax, no, whether personal income tax or corporate income tax, most especially because of the CREATE Act. So we have here corporate income tax. Kung halimbawa hindi mo sinubject sa withholding tax, yung 100,000 pesos will be added to your net taxable income. So yun yung tax exposure mo is 25% or 20% based on the corporate based on the CREATE Act, no? So ibabalik ni BIR yung 100,000 to your net taxable income. So ito yung tax exposure mo. Corporate income tax of 25%, 25,000. because that's a corporate tax rate. Plus, the BIR will impose surcharge, interest, and compromise penalty. So imagine there are different penalties, no, imposed by the BIR. There's surcharge, 25% because of inadvertence, failure to file the return with the correct RDO. Pero right now, no, the BIR has released an advisory wherein you can actually pay anywhere because of the COVID-19 situation. No, hindi mo kailangan magbayad sa accredited agent bank ng RDO mo. All right? And then the BIR will impose interest. The interest is 12% per annum because of the train law, and then compromise penalty. So these total penalties na yan would result to a deficiency income tax of 47,000 pesos. So ibig sabihin for income tax alone, kapag nakita ni BIR na hindi ka na-withhold, i-disallow yung expense, i-add back yan sa net taxable income nyo. Okay? And then the other one is, of course, you did not perform your obligation as withholding tax agent, you will be subjected or assessed of deficiency expanded withholding tax then. So here, if the rental is 100,000, the expanded withholding tax will be 5%, and that's 5,000 plus the penalties. So all in all here, the total deficiency expanded withholding tax is 10,450. So imagine with a rental expense, claim but not subjected to withholding tax would result to a total deficiency taxes of 57,700. So imagine yung 100,000 na binayad mo for rental expense, no? Yung 57,000 ang magiging exposure na dapat mong bayaran kay BIR because of failure to withhold. Pero as I mentioned, no, hindi lang withholding tax ang requirement for expenses. There should be documentation. It must be necessary and ordinary in the course of business and not contrary to law, moral, public order, public policy. But there are other requirements or special rules in terms of other expenses. But I usually discuss that during my common income tax mistakes, no, na webinar. Okay, so you just have to look for my webinars. Okay, but this one I'd like to tell you regarding the computation that we have made. We have here Revenue Regulation 6-2018, wherein it states that the BIR has already revoked Revenue Regulations 12-2013, wherein yung assessment ng income tax, no, there will be changes as to the income tax. Why? The BIR said under Revenue Regulations 12-2013 that if you were able to pay the expanded withholding tax, no, the 10,450, you should have to take note of this. During audit, during investigation, reinvestigation, reconsideration, once you pay the expanded withholding tax together with the penalties, the BIR, who initially assess you of income tax will no longer be assessed. So pag binayaran mo yung 10,450 na yan, the income tax will no longer be assessed. Yan. So ang matitira na lang is 10,450. Alright? Next question, what is the basic legal reference for withholding tax? So some of you definitely would ask, attorney, meron bang tayong pinaka-simpleng reference or let's say outline for withholding tax? Well, actually, I'll tell you, income tax is not simple. It's very dynamic na every now and then nagbabago yung mga rates, no? Na even before the train law, ang withholding tax for professionals, di ba? 10% and 15%, no? Whether individual or non-individual, but because of the train law, it changed, no? Yung sa individuals, it's 5 or 10. For non-individual, it's 10 and 15. Pero I'd like to tell you, if you'd want to know yung, let's say, if you will try to research, but actually you can also ask us, our firm, AAA and Company CPAs for references, or you can actually engage us. You can actually look into Revenue Regulations 2-98 in terms of withholding tax. Pero there's a lot of revisions, amendments, changes that the BIR has already issued, no? So you just have to be updated regarding the rules. Pero some of you will ask, attorney, we know already na kailangan kaming mag-deduct, kailangan naming mag-withhold at mag-remit kay BIR. Pero can the company fix its rule to withhold tax only upon payment and not upon accrual? Ano ibig sabihin nun? Pwede bang every time na lang kami nagbabayad, that's the time na lang kami mag-withhold ng tax, no? Yun ba yung tamang rule ni BIR? Always remember that there might be differences, no, pagdating sa income tax and financial statements, income tax return and financial statements. Same thing also. There's a difference between GAAP and tax rules. Bakit? Kasi si GAAP may recognize revenues upon accrual, no? Meron pang deferment of revenues if you are, let's say, rendering services pero meron kang advance payment. Pero for tax purposes, may sarili rin siyang rule. And ang rule niya actually for withholding tax would be, okay, according to Revenue Regulations 2-98 as amended, Section 2.57.4, no? Time of withholding. Kailan ba kailangan mag-withhold yung withholding tax agent? So if you look at the perspective of the withholding tax agent, kailan ka dapat mag-withhold? It says here, at the time an income is paid or payable, whichever comes first. Okay? So what does it mean? Ibig sabihin, upon accrual or payment, whichever comes first. So always remember that particular rule. Hindi pwede na only upon payment because ito ang bibigay ko sa inyo, no? Common mistake ng mga withholding tax agents is i-record na yung expense, let's say rental expense, pero hindi siya mag-withhold ng tax, hindi siya mag-remit kay BIR the next month. Ang gagawin niya is kapag na-issue na lang or let's say nabayaran na yung rental, let's say after 3 months, tsaka lang binayaran yung rental, that's the time he will withhold tax and remit to the BIR kasi kasabay ng BIR Form 2307. That's wrong. Kung halimbawa by the end of, let's say, December 2021, nag-accrue ka ng rental, you have to withhold tax already. As attorney, hindi pa nga ako nagbabayad eh. Hindi ka pa nga nagbabayad, pero requirement na ni BIR. O di kailangan, yung 5% nun, it would come from your pocket, no? And then i-remit mo na kay BIR, no? Hindi mo hihintayin kung kailan ka nagkaroon ng pera at saka mo babayaran yung withholding tax. Upon accrual, kung kailan mo ni-recognize yung expense, kailangan mo nang i-subject sa withholding tax at i-remit kay BIR. But if you advance, no? Na unang bayad bago yung rental, let's say the advance rental, that should be subjected to withholding tax already and remitted to the BIR. So there's a difference between accounting and tax, no? So for tax purposes, the rule is upon payment or accrual, whichever comes first. Okay, but I'll be showing you here, no, some of the rates we have here according to Revenue Regulations 1-2018 because of the implementation of the train law that we now have the revised withholding tax table. Okay, and I'll just show you here that because of the train law, there's an adjustment as to the income tax rates of individuals. The first 250 is exempt. Okay, that's absolute to all individuals. But the highest income tax rates before na 32% will only be applied now to those who have net taxable income of 2 million up to 8 million pesos. But the highest the highest income tax rate right now is 35%. So itong income tax rate na to is determined, okay, on annualized, no? Annualized to, no? So whatever is your total income for the year, whether from salary or from business income, this is the income tax rates, okay? But we have here effective January 1, 2023 onwards, there will be revised income tax rates. Pero on the part of the employer, most especially some of our participants here are computing also the salary or compensation of their employees, no? This is the revised withholding tax table. Okay, so ito is actually, I'd like to tell you, this is computed also annually. So it means it is expected that beginning January 1, 20, let's say 2021 to December 31, 2021, naging empleyado ninyo yung sinasubject mo sa withholding tax, or the employee started January 1 to December 31, ito yung withholding tax rate na gagamitin mo. Paano, attorney, kung halimbawa nag-start sa July, ito rin ang withholding tax rate na gagamitin mo. Okay? Withholding tax table na gagamitin mo for those employees who started July. But for those employees that were employed after January 1, definitely there should be adjustment in terms of computing their compensation. So ina-annualize mo pa rin siya. Alright? And it only means na may possibility na pwede kang mag-refund sa mga empleyado. Okay? Pero it really depends on how you will compute the withholding tax. Kailangan compliant ka din sa pinakita ko kaninang personal income tax rates. Pero here, I'd like to show you lang, because of the train law, the first 250,000 income of an individual for the taxable year will not be subjected to withholding tax because it's absolutely exempt. That's why here, if you will look at the table, yung let's say monthly compensation is 20,833 and below, yung monthly niyan, that is yung prescribed withholding tax is 0 because that one, if you multiply this by 12, that would show 250,000 pesos. Alright? So exempt siya. So hindi mo na kailangang i-subject sa withholding tax. And then we have here the creditable withholding tax. This is what I mentioned. Let's say for other services, and these are the transactions subject to expanded withholding tax. You will see it's not, well, for those who are using mobile phones, it may not be that really clear. For those who are using laptops, medyo maliit, pero I believe it's readable. We cannot discuss this one by one. Pero this is actually the expanded withholding tax. I mean, these are the transactions subject to expanded withholding tax, But I would like to invite you also na actually I have a webinar in terms of dissecting expanded withholding tax rates, Kasi this one, our webinar, if we'll be given time, we'll be able to cover it. Pero unfortunately, we cannot. Pero I will invite you if you would want to attend yung dissecting expanded withholding tax. All of this, okay, all of this will be discussed, So these are the other transactions subject to expanded withholding tax. And by the way, you will ask, attorney, saan ba namin pwede makita yan? Actually, you can see that dun sa form mismo, like the 1601EQ or 0619E. These are actually printed naman or nasa form. You can also check the website. But if you would need somehow clarifications, you can actually contact us. And then we have here top withholding agent. So some of you will ask, attorney, ano bang pinagkaiba ng top withholding agent dun sa regular withholding tax agent? There are certain transactions na there are regardless of what is your classification, you have to withhold tax on that particular transaction. For example, professionals, professionals, rentals, contractors, these are subject automatically to a specific withholding tax rate. But there are certain transactions na pwede mga minor transactions, minor sales lang na hindi mo na kailangan i-subject sa withholding tax. But the BIR said, if the buyer is now classified as top withholding agent, whether private corporation or individual, what they have to do is to identify yung supplier nila, whether they are regular supplier of goods or services. It only means na kung yung seller or yung supplier had at least 6 transactions in a year, for example, or at least one casual purchase of a transaction amounting to 10,000 pesos, they are classified already as regular supplier. So, as top withholding agent, kung halimbawa na-identify ka and na-notify ka na BIR as top withholding agent, then you have to withhold 1% or 2% on those transactions. Pero I'd like to tell you, baka ma-confuse kayo. Attorney, meron rin bang, di ba meron tayong rate na 2% for contractors, for example? Yes, that is specifically for the contractor. Pero Kung halimbawa, you are providing services na hindi covered ng contractor, hindi covered ng professionals, pero you provided services, no, na hindi nagfo-fall doon, and then you are already a regular supplier, then that transaction should be subjected to specific 2%. Okay? And who are those top withholding agents? No? Large taxpayers, definitely. The others are the top 20,000 private corporations, top 5,000 individuals, those medium taxpayers, and those taxpayers under the Taxpayer Account Management Program or TAM. So some of you will ask, attorney, may times kasi nadi-delay most likely yung nadi-delay yung notice sa amin or hindi namin alam kung kami ay top withholding agent already. What you have to do is go to the website of the BIR and look for the top withholding agents. Kasi right now, for every revenue district office, no, meron silang top withholding agents na nakalista. And then you have to check whether you are included in the list. Kasi there are times the BIR may have included you in the list, but nagdi-delist din naman sila. When we say delisted, no, tinatanggal na kayo sa listahan ng top withholding agents, you don't need to withhold 1% or 2% on certain transactions from regular suppliers. So what you have to do is to be updated also. You look into the website of the BIR. Okay? But now, I would like to show to you a very important item regarding expanded withholding tax. Kasi we all know naman na in terms of expanded withholding tax, yan yung bulk ng transactions na I mean, all of our transactions to reduce payment of income tax would involve recognizing cost and expenses. So, si BIR definitely, aside from substantiation, they will check kung nasubject nga sa withholding tax. Pero on the part of the taxpayer or let's say the seller, okay? The seller, paano nila maka-classify or paano sila makakapag-comply sa withholding tax, no? What are the reminders or pointers in terms of expanded withholding tax? So now that you are already finalizing your income tax returns, kung calendar year kayo, no? By the way, I also have a webinar about year-end tax reminders and preparation of ITR. All right? Pero going back here, let us assume, no, you have already finalized or even, let's say, closed your books already for 2021. So you have already your trial balance wherein it shows all the assets, liabilities, owner's equity, sales, and revenues. Sales, revenues, and expenses, costs and expenses. So nakalist down na lahat yan. Okay? So ang main concern mo definitely yung una is income tax. Pangalawa is business tax, VAT or percentage. The third one is withholding tax. Now the question is, were you able to comply with the withholding tax rules? Well, this is the meat of our discussion for expanded withholding tax. How is that? When I was an examiner of the BIR, what I usually do is to get definitely the trial balance. Pero kung walang trial balance na naibigay kagad, then I would rely on the return submitted to the BIR together with the financial statements. Kasi syempre yung trial balance, it's already it's a summary pero of all the transactions, pero it's definitely translated sa income tax return and financial statements. So from the financial statements, what I usually do is look at the accounts, no? From the assets, pag ang pinag-uusapan natin is withholding tax, no? I look at the accounts, specifically the assets and also the portion ng cost and expenses. Kasi yun ang normally subject to withholding tax, no? Yun ang subject sa withholding tax. So, attorney, paano yung payables? Well, actually, si payables naman, normally, nakalink yan sa expense, no? Nakalink yan sa expense. So, ang madalas na titinitingnan ko pa rin is yung sa expenses. Alright? Plus the assets. Kasi the withholding tax is applicable on those purchases. Yung purchases mo could either be classified initially as asset or pwedeng expense tapos mag-adjusting entry ka na lang by the end of the year kung magkakaroon ka ng prepayment. So this is what I usually do, no? I look into the accounts first. Ano yung mga accounts? So here we have, let's say, yung mga prepaid rent, rental expenses, transpo, depreciation, okay? Professional fees, office supplies. I hope you can read, no, yung material. We have the office supplies, service fee, loan, interest expense, no? Attorney. So, yung loan, di ba liability? Yes, liability. But I would look into actually the expense. So here, these are the accounts, no? And then when I was an examiner, ang ginagawa ko na nililista ko na. So sinesegregate yung assets, okay, from the balance sheet. Tapos i-add ko yung mga expenses. And from here, after listing all of the expenses, I now classify. Alin dito ang subject sa 1%, 2%, 5%, 10%, 15%, no? And I will also identify, okay, are there transactions that are exempt? And then some of you will ask, attorney, bakit mayroon pang credit card dyan? Okay? So, well, actually, if we will try to analyze here, I'll discuss yung sa credit card mamaya, no? So, here, after classifying all of these expenses, with the corresponding rates, nakatabular lang siya. Pero this is a clear indication whether there was non-withholding of tax. Okay? Kasi I was able to classify, usually yung tax return, nilalagyan mo na dapat na mga withholding tax rates. No? And if the transaction, let's say here, is exempt, then you segregate. Kasi there are times si BIR would not check all the expenses na hindi niya iisa-isahin yung mga expenses. Titingnan niya ba kung exempt yan o hindi. Ang gagawin niya is they will ask the taxpayer to submit a schedule in terms of those transactions that are exempt. So before pa lang na ma-audit ka ni BIR or before pa lang na mag-submit ka ng income tax return, let's say for 2021, i-identify mo na kung ano yung mga subject sa withholding tax and ano yung exempt. Okay? In order to reduce the tax exposure and also the effort in explaining to the BIR yung mga exempt transactions. So here, yung mga exempt transaction, actually here, some of you will see here na bakit attorney yung may transportation. This is transportation equipment, by the way. No? Bakit 1% yan? Well, you purchase goods, no? So that one, definitely, if you are a top withholding agent, you have to withhold 1%. Bakit attorney yung depreciation? Let's say that is related to the transportation expense. Bakit wala siyang withholding tax, no? Kasi that one, nakalink na yan sa transportation equipment na nasubject na sa withholding tax. So the depreciation is not subject to withholding tax. Yung professional fee here, may na individual. Bakit 10%? Let us assume na vatable siya. Or let's say his revenues exceeded 3 million pesos. So we can actually present this to the BIR. And here, a general professional partnership. We all know that GPPs are not subject to withholding tax because it's exempt from income tax, no? So it's not a corporate entity subject to corporate income tax. It's the partners that are liable to pay their corresponding income tax. So hindi ka kailangan mag-withhold doon sa professional fee ng GPPs. Pero yung mga non-GPPs, no, pwedeng masubject sa withholding tax. And then service fee. Okay, may nakasulat ditong office supplies, no? Ito, office supplies, i-explain natin. Yan. Nakita niyo diyan, there is 25,000 credit card. Why is it there's no withholding tax rate? So explain ko na rin sa inyo, no? Para at least may idea kayo. If you will use corporate credit card, no, in paying your purchases, you don't need to withhold tax on those purchases. For example, you purchase laptop worth 20,000 pesos and you're top withholding agent. Definitely, you have to withhold tax on the purchase. Or you, let's say, you went to a restaurant, for example, client meeting. Or let's say, partners meeting, or let's say stockholders meeting. So binayaran mo yung hotel, no? Charge to credit card. Pag top withholding agent ka, you have to withhold on the service if you paid it in cash, check. Pero kung igagamitin mo is corporate credit card, I'd like to tell you, you don't need to withhold tax on the income payment because the credit card is the one who is required to withhold tax, okay, on the payment to the merchant. Okay? So, kapag binayaran na ni credit card si, let's say, si hotel or si seller ng laptop, mag-withhold yan ng 0.5%. So, hindi mo na kailangang mag-withhold. Si credit card company ang mag-withhold. Pero, actually, if the credit card company, let's say, charges, for example, annual fees, okay, interest, service charge, no? Yan, if you are a top withholding agent under RMC 64-2014, okay, 72-2014, our service fee, no, yung service fee na yan ang isasubject mo sa withholding tax na 2%. We also have here yung loan, principal, 50,000. Let's say you borrowed money from a bank, no? So here, in terms of yung principal, okay, you have to remember that in case of income tax, tax is only imposed on the gain. Okay, it's not imposed on the principal. Kasi we have to remember the difference between return of capital, binalik mo yung capital, and return on the capital. Yung return on the capital is yung tinubo ng capital. So here, kapag nagpautang ka or you borrowed, or let's say you are the one who borrowed money and then you pay the principal, on the part of the lender, there is no gain to speak of, no? Hindi ka kailangang magbayad ng income tax for the return of the principal. Pero yung interest, yan ang dapat mong isubject sa withholding tax. That's why here, the principal is not subject to withholding tax. Okay, in terms of loans, there's a very specific RMC kasi regarding sa loans. And then the interest expense on the loan will have to be subjected to 2% kung halimbawang ikaw ay top withholding agent. Okay? So even yung mga banks, no, I believe some of you are most of you are okay, most of you will be transacting with banks, and then you borrow money from the bank and you're top withholding agent. Don't hesitate to tell the bank that you are one of the top withholding agents para yung mga interest, even yung mga bank charges na ini-impose nila will be subjected to 2%. Sasabihin mo sa kanila. Alright? Otherwise kasi penalize ka ni BIR eh. Okay? So the question, what shall be the basis of expanded withholding tax or creditable withholding tax on payments made to a non-VAT registered supplier of goods or services? So ito naman, attorney, paano ba kami mag-withhold? Kasi pag tiningnan namin yung resibo, ang daming computation eh. Merong selling price, merong 12% VAT pa, so total sales, no? Alin ang isa-subject namin sa withholding tax? Well, what you have to remember is you first identify whether the seller is a VAT-registered entity or a non-VAT. No? Some of you will ask, kailan ba kami VAT? Kailan ba non-VAT? Well, for VAT entities or for entities to be subjected to VAT or classified as VAT entity, their revenues or sales should first exceed 3 million pesos in a year. Okay? Kapag lumagpas sa 3 million, they have to register already as VAT. Pero pag hindi, percentage tax. Pero actually there is a provision under the VAT law. Okay? I also have lecture about VAT. There's a provision under the VAT law na you have the option to register as VAT entity kahit hindi ka lumagpas ng 3 million pesos. So it's option. There's an option. Okay? Pero hindi option kung lumagpas ka ng 3 million. Automatic VATable ka. Pero pag 3 million and below, you have the option of registering as VAT entity. Okay? Pero let us assume that the seller, for example, is a non-VAT, no? Non-VAT entity, and then he is providing services, and the service is subject, for example, to 2% contractor, okay, 70, sorry, yung kanina, na-reference 72-2004, no? Yung binanggit ko. So, ito yon. Kung halimbawa, the gross billing and percentage taxpayer to, nag-bill sa'yo ng 100,000 and you are required to withhold tax na 2%, so automatic i-deduct mo lang yung 2% and then i-remit mo sa BIR, then the difference of 98 will have to be given or will be received by the payee or the seller kung non-VAT siya. Pero kung vatable siya, what you have to do, so it says here, what shall be the basis of creditable withholding tax to a VAT-registered supplier of goods and services? For VAT-registered entities, you have to remove first the VAT component. Okay? So, it should be exclusive or net of VAT muna bago mo i-subject yan sa withholding tax. So, let's say the gross amount here is 112,000, no? Inclusive of VAT. What you have to do is to remove first the value-added tax. Kaya may makikita dito na 112 divided by 1.12 times 2%, no? That's the 2% expanded. You first remove the VAT component, which is the 12,000 pesos here. So, ang magiging tax base niya is 100,000. Multiply by 2%, that's 2,000. And then, that's the amount of expanded withholding tax. Okay? That's why the net amount due of the payee would be 110,000. All right? And then, that is for creditable withholding tax. Okay? So, we have already mentioned yung creditable, that on the part of the income recipient, he is required to file his return, no, on a quarterly or a yearly basis, yung return, and use this as tax credit, yung 2%. Pero there is another withholding tax that we mentioned, and that is final withholding tax, which we have discussed that once the transaction is subjected to final withholding tax, it's already a final settlement of the tax liability. Right? So this one, I'll just flash you, show you here the final tax rates, no, of different transactions. You can actually look into the BIR website also. Okay, even actually sa returns ng final tax returns, nandoon yung schedule, no? But as I mentioned, there will be a separate, actually I have a separate webinar for withholding tax rates. So, I mean, final withholding tax rates and creditable withholding tax. All right? So here are the other transactions. Kasi normally, as I discuss withholding tax, it would take at least a day or two. All right? I'm just giving you an overview of withholding tax because this is one of the obligations of the taxpayer. But I'd like to tell you that even government agencies are required to withhold tax, no, on their transactions with private entities, even definitely on the compensation of the employees. So I will show you here that the one who's responsible in terms of compliance or withholding tax compliance would be the heads of office and chief accountants, no? And other individuals or employees holding similar positions. Pero here, I would like to show to you the similarities as to the roles of withholding tax agents as private entity tsaka government agencies. So hindi exempt actually mga government agencies from withholding tax. Yung obligation for them to withhold nandun din. So parehas yung private and government agency na kailangan nilang mag-withhold on certain transactions. But on the part of the government, they are also required to register as withholding tax agent and require employees to submit the duly accomplished application for registration, yung BIR Form 1902. So yung mga empleyado, whether private or government, so I'm discussing this for the benefit of the two entities, no, or institutions, na yung mga employees, they have to update also the registration with the BIR, no? Hindi lang yung employer ang kailangan mag-update ng registration nila. Even mga employees have to update the registration with the BIR. And also, you have to withhold the correct amount of tax. So in terms of the tax rates, I have shown to you earlier, but if you want to uh, look into the website also of the BIR, you can do that. But actually, I'll be providing this deck to you. No, don't worry. So the withholding tax rates are the following. Withholding taxes are the following. We have the withholding tax on compensation. We have the expanded withholding tax and final withholding tax, which I have actually mentioned earlier. But before, I'd like to tell you, there is government money payments na dinideduct ni government sa mga transactions for the business tax component. Kasi, di ba, binanggit natin yung creditable withholding tax is applicable only to income tax. But in case of government transactions, they also withhold tax on the business tax component, like the VAT or percentage tax, no? So here, there is an additional, kasi syempre, you already transacted with the government has to be aggressive in collecting taxes. So hindi lang yung income tax portion ang wini-withhold nila, pati yung VAT or percentage tax component. Unlike for private companies, no, most of the time yung income tax lang. Nagkakaroon lang ng withholding tax on VAT if the person involved is a non-resident alien. All right? Engaged in business, and also non-resident foreign corporations. And then these are the other obligations of both the private and government withholding tax agents to remit on time taxes withheld. So most of the time, for the monthly remittance, I'll show you the deadlines later, pero actually there's 10 days after the close of the month, or merong the last day of the month after the close of the quarter. Okay? We also have to issue the corresponding certificates, yun yung BR Form 2307, 2316, or 2306, to do the year-end adjustment. Kasi nga, as I mentioned, for compensation, there should be annualization, no? And then timely file with the BIR, the annual information return and alphabetical list of employees and payees. So, by the way, some of you will say, attorney, di ba, ang deadline na last time is yung January 30, yung sa alpha list, no? Let's say sa mga employees. Dapat, pero, okay, actually, that one, it was already extended under Revenue Regulations 1-2002 for those areas that are classified as alert level number 3 or higher. Okay? So, na-extend ng 30 days. And what are the criminal liabilities? No? This one is applicable, sinabi ko sa government, meron din actually criminal liability sa private individuals. Pero ito, highlight ko even sa government, that every officer or employee of the government, shall withhold tax, and in case there's failure to withhold tax and remit to the BIR, and the BIR pursued the filing of the criminal case against the employee. Kasi actually, take note, a violation of the tax code is considered as a criminal act. And in case of such in case of violation of the tax code, the BIR may file the criminal case, and upon conviction, pag sinabing conviction, let's say the accused is considered guilty beyond reasonable doubt, no? So dadaan sa proseso actually yun. So may mga hearings pa yan. Pero upon conviction, there will be penalties. All right? There will be penalties that will be imposed against the taxpayer. One is imprisonment, okay, and the other one is actually fines, no? I guess you are aware of this already. Na may mga recent news about failure to pay tax, no? Not only with tax with private entities, business entities, and then how will I say this? Basta alam niyo na 'yon, no? May mga nag-iingay ngayong former commissioner about non-payment of tax. Pero anyway, these are other instances wherein the BIR may file the criminal case against the government employee. Okay? So this is for withholding tax. But this is what I mentioned about withholding tax on government money payments. So, yung government money payments would be on the business tax portion, which is the VAT and the percentage tax. So here, this is originally the government money payments. No? So sasabihin nyo, attorney, bakit originally? Kasi I will tell you yung transition. So normally, before si government agency, hindi lang si BIR, all government agencies, instrumentalities, and units, no, they have to withhold also tax on government money payments. They have to withhold the expanded withholding tax and also the government money payments, either 5% or 3% before, no? So this is the original, no? Para at least may reference kayo. So this is the original 5% final VAT and then 3%. Pero actually there was a change because of the train law and also the CREATE Act, no? So here, this is just the table, original table, but I'd like to tell you here, Revenue Memorandum Circular 36-2021. Doon sa 5% na pinakita ko sa inyo before, some of you may have transacted with the government already before na nagwi-withhold automatically sila ng 5% for value-added tax entities, no? Or suppliers. So, yung 5% na yan before, ang treatment dyan is final VAT withholding. So, once you hear the final VAT, no, or final withholding tax, it's a final settlement. So, hindi mo na kailangan mag-declare pa, no, or magbayad pa ng additional tax because it's a final settlement of the tax liability. Pero that was before, no? Upon the effectivity of the provision of the train law, no, merong sinasabi na yung final withholding tax will shift to creditable pagdating dun sa 5%, no? Na right now, kapag nag-transact ka sa government, there's no more what we call, okay, there's no more final VAT withholding. Magiging creditable VAT na siya. Wherein, as you file now your VAT returns and then you had transactions with the government, you can claim it as creditable lang. Okay? There was a discussion before sa VAT, discussion ko about VAT na meron pa tayong tinatawag na standard input tax tsaka actual input tax, may comparison. Pero ngayon wala na yon, no? Kasi whatever input tax that you have right now, you can claim it. If it's over than the output tax, then you don't have to pay tax, no? Pero this is what I mentioned, the VAT withholding system will shift from final to creditable system beginning January 1, 2021. Kaya yung mga transactions with the government, no, they will withhold expanded withholding tax and they also withhold, no, VAT if you are VAT registered, but it's classified now as creditable. Okay? So this is more on the forms, the BR Form 2550Q. Okay, kung halimbawa hindi pa na-revise. Pero right now, this is the form that you will use as in terms of final VAT withholding. Okay, this is specifically for government agencies. We have that BR Form 1600 VT. Meron din actually PT, no? Pagdating sa government agencies as proof of their withholding tax and remittance. Okay? That's what they will use. And then for the others, no, yung halimbawang sa non-resident aliens, ito rin. Okay? And then here, the form that will be used now is BIR Form 2307 because it's creditable. Kasi kung halimbawang final, the tax is final, withholding tax, what you have to issue is BIR Form 2306. Pero sabi ko nga sa inyo, di ba, nag-shift na from final to creditable. So the form that you will use, okay, or that will be issued to claim tax credit will be BIR Form 2307 instead of the BIR Form 2306 if we're talking about value-added tax. All right? Because the other one is percentage tax, that's still final. Pero actually meron tayong tinatawag din na substituted filing, no, for government agencies. So for those who are here as government employees, there's a different treatment actually for percentage tax, di ba? So pero I'd like to tell you under Revenue Memorandum Circular 67-2021, we all know naman na there's the passage of the CREATE Act wherein yung percentage taxpayers who are previously paying 3%, no, they are now only subject to 1%. So from 3%, naging 1% na lang yung dapat nilang bayaran. So on the part of the government agency, no, aside from they are required to withhold this, ito yung binanggit ko, they are required to withhold tax on income that is creditable, and they also have to withhold tax on business tax or sales tax, 5% creditable VAT, no, or 1% if the supplier is subject to percentage tax. So on the part of the seller, no, seller kay government, you will be receiving BR Form 2307, okay, for the 5%. Kung percentage naman, 1%. Okay? Pero I'd like to tell you nga, you have to check also yung sa mga suppliers kasi there is a rule regarding sa mga suppliers sa government na percentage tax kung pwede silang mag-qualify under substituted filing. Okay? And then as to the administrative compliance, actually these are the basic withholding tax forms and certificates that you will use to comply with the withholding tax provisions of the tax codes. Okay, so we have the 1601C, 0619E, which is the monthly compliance, no? Okay, and then 1601EQ for the quarterly withholding, expanded withholding tax, 0619F for the final withholding tax. We also have 1601FQ for quarterly return of final withholding tax, 1602Q for those withheld for taxes withheld, okay, on interest payments on deposits. 1603Q for fringe benefits. Yung fringe benefits, would involve yung mga managerial and supervisory employees, no? And then here is yung mga annualized like 1604C, 1604F, 1604E. Okay, so these are the forms that you will use, and these are the certificates naman. We have the BR Form 2304, okay, for transactions not subject to withholding tax. We have the final withholding tax of certificate of 2306. This is the creditable 2307, and then the withholding tax on compensation, which is 2316. Okay, so there's a deadline. Don't worry, no, you will be able to get this deck. No, I will be providing the deck to you. All right, and then there are other matters. I think we still have time. No, I still have 10,000 slides to discuss. Okay, for 30 minutes. So let's have this question. Some of you will ask, attorney, let's say our entity is a non-stock, non-profit organization, or let's say a foundation that is exempt under the tax code, or we are under section 30 of the tax code. Are we still required to withhold tax? Kasi hindi ka naman nagbabayad ng income tax. So, kailangan mo pa bang mag-withhold? Well, actually, the BIR has already issued actually even mga certifications, no? Always remember yung mga non-stock, non-profit organizations, the BIR required them to obtain a tax exemption ruling, no? And then subject to revalidation after 3 years. Pero for educational institution, isa lang, isang tax exemption ruling. Pero I'd like to show you one tax exemption certificate wherein it says here, this entity, okay, Ryomar Outreach Foundation, they are actually a non-stock non-profit, no, it's a foundation. Pero once they receive yung certificate, it notified them here na they shall be constituted as withholding agent for the government if it acts as an employer or its employees receive compensation, or if they have transacted with individuals or corporations subject to tax. So it only means that I emphasized earlier your personality, whether you are income taxpayer, no, when income taxpayer, you are liable to pay tax based on your income, but that is different from your obligation or role of being a withholding tax agent. So doble yung personality mo. I'm not saying you're yung schizophrenia, no? Hindi ka schizo. You have two obligations talaga or personality as income taxpayer, and then the other one is withholding tax agent. As withholding tax agent, you have to perform your obligation even you are not liable to pay income tax. Alright? That's why here, you have to withhold. Kasi halimbawa, meron kang nirerentahan nga as foundation, so yung rental expense na yan should be subjected to withholding tax in order for you to help the government collect taxes. You will inform them, eto, lesser to, no? Yung inuupahan namin. So, you withhold tax and then you remit it, and then the lessor will be compelled to pay the corresponding income tax. And then here is the payment of the principal and interest on loans, service fees, and other charges subject to expanded withholding tax. This is what I have mentioned earlier, na only interest payments on loans, service fees, and other charges considered as income are subject to 2%. Okay? And then the principal payment is not subject to expanded withholding tax according to Revenue Memorandum Circular number 72-2004. All right? And then here, as to payment of goods or services, this is what I mentioned earlier about credit card companies. All right? That they will withhold 1/2 of 1%. Kung ginamit mo yung credit card nila, sila na magwi-withhold dun sa merchant. Pero kung, let's say, it's the credit card company who imposes charges, annual fees, or dues, yun ang isasubject mo sa 2% if you are a top withholding agent or a government agency. All right? And then the other one is, what if yung employees mo, no, may mga reimbursement kasi you instructed na, yung mga purchases ninyo, kung halimbawa it's related to business, bilhin ninyo, no, magpa-reimburse na lang kayo. What if, let's say, yung employees bumili and then nagpapa-reimburse sa inyo? Sila ba kailangan nilang mag-withhold din ng tax? Yes. You have to instruct your people na in terms of those purchases, kung mag-qualify yan as transaction subject to withholding tax, they have to withhold. Okay? Kahit for reimbursement yan, no? They have to withhold. Otherwise, the taxpayer or let's say the business entity itself will be penalized by the BIR for non-withholding. Okay? So the reimbursable expenses are subject to withholding tax of 1% on goods or services if you are a top withholding agent. And there must be BIR Form 2307 issued. Okay? And also, here we are one of the top corporations required to withhold 1% and 2% on purchase of goods and services. We avail the services of a PEZA-registered company inside PEZA. Are we required to withhold tax on payment? Well, actually, doon sa mga PEZA-registered entities, no, I'd like to tell you also that may mga lectures about the CREATE Act, no, regarding PEZA. Very controversial actually right now yung issue ni BIR na yung mga only the registered activities or primary activities are qualified for zero rating and or let's say exemption, even for the income tax holiday, only the registered activity. So in case the activity of the PEZA registered entity is, if the PEZA registered entity would be engaged in other activities, no, na hindi qualified as primary activity or not qualified for income tax holiday, then you subject that to withholding tax. Okay? That's why it says here in this particular BIR ruling, it says here, considering that the sale of properties is not among the registered activities of FPIP, it shall be subject to creditable withholding tax. All right? And then here, ito naman, the spouses owned parcels of land and was sold to the National Housing Authority. So, syempre, it's a government agency which qualifies under the Urban Development and Housing Act, no, yung urban housing. Are the spouses subject to tax? Okay? So, binenta nila yung lupa nila sa NHA for housing, no, urban housing. The government, the BIR said, so here, there's a sale of property. Kaya lang, yung transaction na yan is exempt. Okay? So, since it's exempt, you don't need to withhold. Kasi yung mga yung seller, no, as they file the tax return, whether it's income tax or let's say capital gains tax, no, since it's an exempt transaction, they will just indicate it as exempt. So, on the part of the buyer, they don't need to withhold tax kasi hindi naman magagamit nung seller. Okay? So, it would be, well, actually burdensome on the part of the seller kung halimbawang na-subject pa sa withholding tax yan. Kasi ang mangyayari is, kailangan pa niya mag-apply for refund. Alright? E pag nag-apply ka ng refund kay BIR, no, it would take time, no, even years. And what will happen is, the BIR will audit, and if, let's say, it will be denied, no, you have the option of elevating that to the court, pero it would be very costly. So it's really a requirement on the part of the taxpayer and even the withholding tax agent to know the roles, okay, the roles of each person or entity and the rules of the BIR, so that one, you will be able to save tax, but you'll be able to help also the government in terms of collecting taxes. All right, so that covers our topic for this morning. I know you are very interested in all other items, matters, or topics that I have discussed this morning. Pero unfortunately, we're not able to discuss everything because for the time that we have right now, we only have 2 hours, no? Pero if you have some items that you'd like to learn from my discussion or from my webinars, actually, feel free to inquire from us, no? So with that, always remember, as business entities, okay, even individuals, no, we are required to pay the corresponding tax on our income, but it does not, okay, exempt us from being a withholding tax agent. The role of a withholding tax agent is to support our government in terms of tax collection by deducting the correct amount of tax on income payments and remit it to the government. Because in that case, no, the income recipient will be compelled to declare the correct amount of income, and on the part of the withholding tax agent who is claiming the expense, he'll be able to claim the expense as provided by the rules. All right. So with that, always remember, okay, taxes are the lifeblood of the government. And as I end my lecture today, no, always remember that those taxes are actually considered properties or assets of the taxpayers. And therefore, we should be wise, okay, in terms of paying taxes, but also remember, we should also be wise in choosing the right leaders, because those leaders who will be elected this May 2022 will be the ones who will be managing and utilizing all the taxes that we have paid. All right. So with that, I'll be turning over the screen to our host, RB, okay, for questions or clarifications from our participants.
Wow, maraming salamat, Attorney Arnold. It was indeed very informative, and we saw, the comments of the audience as well. And we're very thankful for giving us this informative discussion this morning. And in fact, you know the audience very well that there were over 100 questions that actually came in. So we were filtering similar questions. And towards the end of your webinar, when you discuss the FAQ, probably half have already been answered. So
okay.
That's good, no? So I think we have a couple more minutes, Attorney. Can we take probably 3 to 5 more questions?
Yes.
Yeah. Sige. So we tagged a few questions here. Probably we'll just pick 3 to 5 in random. So there's one from Chen Tamayo. It's on the Q&A tab, and the question goes that 2 of the incorporators of a family corporation are no longer shareholders, nor any position in the corporation. However, the current BODs, Board of Directors, decided to give said 2 incorporators a monthly income of 100,000 each. What will be the treatment of the corporation? How it will be recorded? Is it's subject to withholding tax?
Okay, so that's a very interesting question, no? You mentioned that they are no longer stockholders. they are no longer considered as members of the board. So it depends actually on their classification kasi in terms of withholding tax. If the company will classify them as employees, you subject that to withholding tax. All right? But if you consider them as, let's say, a professional, okay, a consultant, then that should be subjected to expanded withholding tax. But there are certain cases wherein, no, and this is just an additional information. Kasi actually, regarding that one, it depends on how you will classify it. If you classify them as employees, ang magiging risk na lang dyan is they should be entitled to employees benefits, no? Yung mga regular na SSS, PhilHealth Pag-ibig, and also they may be entitled to retirement pay, no? That should be computed by Salamea as to the retirement pay if they are employees. Pero kung consider mo na lang sila as professionals, then they are subject to expanded withholding tax. But here, i-link na lang din natin yan for income tax purposes. Kasi kung classify mo sila as employees, then you subject that to withholding tax on compensation, there's no need for documentation. As to invoices or receipts, to claim expense, yung payroll register lang, that's sufficient to claim it as deductible expense. Pero kung i-classify mo siya as professional, these are outside services that should be subjected to withholding tax. And then there must be substantiation wherein the professional will have to provide official receipt for the services rendered. So yun yung risk, no? You have to establish yung contractual relationship between the corporation and these two non-incorporator, actually hindi natin masasabing non-incorporator. There are incorporators pa rin kasi nasa article sila. They may not be stockholders anymore or members of the board. Then you just have to establish yung contractual relationship.
Okay, thank you, attorney. Here's a second question. This one is from Maria Catherine Agbay. And this is something that I think many of us can relate to, no? Given the pandemic that everybody's doing their online shopping, even for office supplies, right? Yes. So if your purchases are bought from digital platforms like Shopee, Lazada, Amazon, how will you withhold taxes?
Okay, that's a very interesting question, no? Because of the COVID-19, there are a lot of businesses na nagsara. Okay, pero there's a lot of businesses also na nag-open, most especially mga online sellers. But I would like to mention that even during the time of Commissioner Henares, she has already issued a regulation wherein it requires, actually it's a policy wherein it encourages, no? Even actually during this time kay Commissioner Dulay, they encourage taxpayers to register even mga online sellers because those buyers will require issuance of official receipts or invoices. So kung halimbawa ikaw yung buyer, pwede kang mag-withhold, no? Pero ang problem here is actually the invoice or the receipt. So you'll not be able to claim those expenses or mga supplies if you will not be able to get the receipts or invoices from the online sellers. Kasi ang gusto ni BIR is for business entities to patronize registered taxpayers. So if we're patronizing actually mga unregistered businesses, mga online sellers, di pwedeng mangyari dyan is hindi na lang pala magre-register lahat, no? Kasi hindi naman pala nire-require. So magta-thrive yung business, magiging successful kahit hindi pala registered kay BIR. So ganun ang pwedeng mindset. Kaya si BIR, ang policy nila is you have to withhold but you still have to get the sales invoice from online sellers. Pero yun nga, ang magiging problem, yung mga platforms, may times talagang they'll not issue the corresponding receipt, no? That's one challenge on the part of the buyer. So you try to choose the entities or the suppliers that are registered with the BIR.
All right. Thanks, attorney. So this one naman is in relation to probably in the hospitality industry, no? So this is from Jomart Labao. Hello, may we confirm if there is any withholding tax for the service charge paid in any restaurant, hotel, etc.? And then is there a memo for their reference on this one?
Well, yes, actually, kasama 'yon sa withholding tax, no? Kasi kini-claim din naman 'yan nung actually nung business entity. Let's say you went to a restaurant or sa hotel, no? Nakalagay naman sa billing 'yan. And actually, as I mentioned regarding the service charge, kailangan mo i-subject din 'yan sa withholding tax. Okay? Kasi that one si BIR, no? All expenses as much as possible. If you're yung mga service charge na yun, if you are one of the top withholding agents, you subject that to withholding tax. Pero kung hindi naman, you don't need to withhold. So, as I emphasized earlier, there are certain transactions that are automatically subject to withholding tax, no? Like yung mga contractors, like yung mga professionals, even mga janitorial and manpower agencies, they are subject to withholding tax automatically as contractors. Pero like mga service charge na yan, that will only apply to those top withholding agents. Okay? So you are required to withhold if you're a top withholding agent, and that service charge provided by the entity is classified already as yung regular supplier. You had 6 transactions with that business establishment, or at least 10,000, one casual purchase. Okay? So you have to subject that to withholding tax on the condition that you're a top withholding agent.
Thanks, attorney. So probably we're down to our last question, and then we just lump questions related to this, no? What will be the date on the BIR 2307? Is it based on payment or accrual? I think we got more than 10 questions related to this one.
Actually, naglag. Sorry, RB, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, sure. What will be the date on the BIR form 2307? Is it based on payment date or on the or accrual?
Okay, that's a very good question, and it's one of the common mistakes, no? One of the common mistakes of withholding tax agents na yung do sa BIR form 2307, the date that you have to indicate would be the date of withholding tax and remittance to the BIR. So if you have, let's say, accrued yung expense, as I mentioned, let's say for rental December 2021, so you have to remit already the 5%. And then as you issue the BIR from 2307, the date that you will indicate is the December 2021. Kahit na, for example, binayaran mo yung renta, let's say July na lang, no, of the following year. Pero kinlay mo yung expense ng December, you have to indicate the BIR from 2307 in the 2307, the December 2021, not the date of payment. Why? Kasi actually, on the part of the lessor, i-declare niya na yan as rental income in December 2021. So kahit na-collectal pa yan ng July, no? On the part of the BIR, ang titingnan niya is yung recognition ng income, kahit yung payment is delayed. So always remember, it is upon the withholding of tax and remittance to the BIR. Okay? So dapat babangga yan dun sa 0619E or 1601EQ na date. All right?
All right. So thanks so much, attorney. No? So I know you did put in the chat box the link to get a copy of your deck. I tried clicking it. That's why probably you're getting a lot of notifications kasi it's requesting for you to grant access. But not to worry, everybody. We'll be also sending you the link tomorrow, and that you can download directly from the link that we're sending tomorrow. As for the video, the recording of the video, you could visit our Facebook page. It's the Zalamea, just type Zalamea Facebook page, and where we did the Facebook Live, and that's where you're gonna get a recording as well. So Arnold, before I say my final goodbyes, let me call on Enrique for his final words. You're on mute, yeah. Wala.
Okay. Thank you, Attorney Arnold, for a comprehensive discussion on withholding taxes. Although some portion I'm a little confused, but I can get along with that. Thank you very much. And also, I would like to thank the participants. And we apologize that some of you have to go to the Facebook because we went beyond the 1,000 participants. Thank you very much. Thank you, Raymond.
All right. Our Attorney Arnold, any final words from you as well? And how I know you've already flashed your contact details, but we'll also send them to all the participants and how, in case they would need your services as well.
All right. So always remember, no, aside from actually complying with the general accepted accounting principles in terms of accounting, no, we have to remember that we also have the obligation to pay the correct amount of tax. But the taxes that we have to pay would rely on the tax code and the revenue regulations and issuances of the BIR. And it is a must on the part of the taxpayer to be updated. So if, let's say, you fail to attend, let's say, lectures like this, sponsored by Zelamea, no, don't worry, you can actually access our website and then you can inquire for tax trainings, but we can also provide tax consultancy services. We also provide retainer services. But what's really important is for you to have a tax due diligence. Because when we say tax due diligence, we will check actually the structure, your current structure, and try to improve, okay, as to the processes in terms of tax compliance. Because once the BIR actually visits your office and conducts the audit, medyo magkakaroon ka ng confidence if you believe that you have already complied with the tax rules. All right. So with that, thank you very much, Zelamea, for inviting me as your resource speaker, and I look forward of being your guest speaker in the future webinars that would be dealing with taxation.
Yeah, we will make it happen, Attorney. We will definitely want to invite you back in, and you have made this interesting topic very engaging. Everybody stayed in, everybody's still here, and there are just so many questions. If only we had the whole day to answer all the questions, we would. So hopefully in the next webinar, we can have the same number of people and the engagements and the questions we could answer more. So thank you again, Attorney. Thanks so much to all our attendees. We look forward to seeing you in our future webinars. And God bless and stay safe, everybody. Bye. Have a great week ahead. Thanks again, Attorney. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, so we'll be sending again the link to the deck tomorrow for in your email. So you can get access to that. Okay, bye. Signing off. Bye, everybody.
Bye.